The heat in my apartment had been running a little too hard, the kind that makes the air feel dry even when it's cold outside. I was sitting at my small kitchen table in Minneapolis, a mug of tea going lukewarm in front of me, watching snow drift past the streetlight like it had all night. My phone lit up again. It was a text from my mom. It wasn't long, just a few lines that landed heavy. She told me not to come home for Christmas. She said my sister couldn't handle seeing me, and she didn't want a scene. She wrote it like she was giving me a weather update, like this was the reasonable plan. I read it once. Then I read it again, slower, waiting for my body to do something loud. It didn't. I set the phone down on the table, face up, and listened to the building settle. Pipes clicking, someone's TV through the wall, a door closing down the hall. I didn't answer her. I'm Lauren, I'm 33, and I work as a data analyst for a mid-size logistics company. I've always been the person who handles things, not because I like being in charge, but because I don't like chaos. I like receipts, timelines, files with dates in the names. I like knowing what happened and when. That night, I stayed where I was. Outside, the neighborhood was doing what it does every year. Porch lights, people coming and going with wrapped boxes, a couple laughing too loudly in the parking lot. Somewhere nearby, someone had a little speaker playing music that kept fading in and out when they moved around. I cleaned my mug, even though it didn't need it. I wiped the counter. I straightened a stack of mail I wasn't going to open. At 11:55 p.m., my phone started buzzing across the table. Mom. I didn't pick up right away. I watched it vibrate once, then twice, like it was trying to insist on being important. When I finally answered, I didn't say much. I just listened. The first thing I heard was noise. Not a normal background kind of noise. It sounded like a room full of people all talking at once, and then a sharper layer cutting through it, distant and repeating. Sirens. More than one. Then my sister's voice came through, high and unsteady. "What did you do?" she said. "Why are there cops here?" She wasn't asking like she wanted an explanation. She was asking like she needed a target. I kept my voice flat. "Hi, Emma." That didn't slow her down. "There are 2 police cars," she said, and I could hear her breathing hard. "Mom said you weren't coming. So, what is this? Are you trying to ruin us?" In the background, someone else shouted something I couldn't make out. A door slammed. I heard my mother's voice too, farther away like she was moving around while trying to keep up with the moment. I stayed quiet long enough for Emma to realize I wasn't matching her speed. Then I said, "Where are you right now?" "At the house," she snapped, like it was obvious, like there was only one place in the world that mattered. I looked out my window at the snow drifting down into the orange streetlight. Everything outside was slow and steady. Inside my apartment, the only sound was the heater. I didn't tell her anything, not because I wanted to punish her, because I didn't know yet what she was seeing, and I wasn't going to guess. Emma kept talking, words piling up. "You did something," she said. "You had to. This doesn't just happen." I didn't argue with her. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I just listened, and somewhere in the sirens and the shouting, I remembered the first time things felt wrong, weeks earlier, right after my dad died, when my mother slid a stack of papers across the kitchen counter and asked me to sign without reading. I hadn't forgotten that moment. I'd filed it away, and I'd kept one other thing, too. A small receipt I'd found by accident, creased at the edges with a store name on it that didn't belong in our house. On the phone, Emma went quiet for half a second, like someone had said something to her off to the side. Then her voice came back sharper. "They're asking about loans," she said. "They're asking about accounts." I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my mug again, even though it was empty, just to have something in my hands. Then I said calmly, "Put Mom on." There was a pause, a scramble of movement, and the sound of the phone shifting from one person to another. And then my mother's voice came on the line, thin and strained, like she was trying to keep control of a room that was slipping away. "Lauren," she said. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit there, steady and deliberate, while the sirens kept going in the background, and I waited to hear what she chose to say next. My dad's funeral was in late November, the kind of gray day where the sky looks like it's holding its breath. The cemetery grass was flattened from an early snow, and my shoes kept slipping a little on the wet walkway. Inside the small chapel, the air smelled like lilies and wool coats drying too slowly. I'd been running on routine for so long that grief felt almost procedural at first. For the last 2 years, Dad's world had narrowed to medication schedules, insurance calls, and nights where the only light in the house came from the hallway lamp and the blue glow of a monitor. I adjusted my job around it. I used my savings when the equipment wasn't covered. I learned how to speak calmly to nurses when I was tired enough to shake. My sister, Emma, wasn't around during those years. She would call sometimes, usually with a reason, but she didn't show up in the day-to-day way that matters when someone is actually sick. She did show up for the funeral. She arrived late, stepping into the chapel with her phone in her hand like she was checking directions, and she looked polished in a way that didn't match the room. Not inappropriate exactly, just out of tune. She paused near the entry, glanced around, and then moved down the aisle with that quick, confident walk people use when they want to seem unbothered. When the service ended and people started folding into small conversations, I stayed near the back, answering quiet questions and accepting hugs I barely felt. I was trying to keep my face steady so I didn't make anyone uncomfortable. That's a habit I've had for a long time. Emma found me anyway, not with a hug, not with a, "How are you holding up?" She leaned in close like we were sharing something private and asked, "So what happens with the life insurance?" It took me a second to understand she meant it literally. Money, policies, not the general idea of settling the estate, but details, numbers. I remember looking at her and thinking, I don't know where you keep your grief, but it isn't here. I told her I didn't want to talk about it. I kept my voice even. I didn't make a scene. She nodded like she accepted it, then walked away and started talking to our aunt as if nothing had happened. A few days later, we were back at my mom's house, the same place I'd spent most of the last 2 years caring for Dad. The house still smelled faintly like antiseptic wipes and the peppermint tea he used to drink when he couldn't sleep. The living room looked normal, but the normal was thin. My mom, Brenda, waited until Emma stepped out to take a call. Then she called me into the kitchen. She had a stack of papers on the table, already clipped, already marked with little sticky notes. She slid them toward me like she'd been practicing the motion. "I need you to sign these," she said. I didn't touch them. I just looked down at the top page, legal language, property, transfer. Mom kept talking, her words rehearsed. Emma had gotten into trouble, she said. Bad investments, fees, debt. She said it like she was describing a car repair that had gone wrong. She told me the cleanest solution was for Emma to take full ownership of the house and for me to step aside. "You have a stable job," she said. "You don't need it like she does." I stared at her for a moment, trying to match her expression to what she was asking. I couldn't. I reminded her quietly that I'd paid for things while Dad was sick. Equipment, private help. Not because I expected to be repaid, but because it had to be done. I told her Dad wanted things split between us. I said I wasn't signing anything I hadn't reviewed with an attorney. Mom's mouth tightened. She didn't yell. She didn't have to. The disappointment was delivered like a verdict. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet without Dad's breathing down the hall. I got up and went into his study to look for his old tax folder, the one with the labeled tabs he used for years. It was a small room with a worn leather chair and a glass display case he kept locked. That case was where he stored his vintage watches, the ones he'd collected slowly over decades. He used to take them out and polish them with care, like the act itself was calming. The case was empty. At first, I thought my eyes were tired. I opened it anyway. Nothing, just the lining, still shaped where the watches had rested. I stood there longer than I needed to. Then I walked out into the hallway, keeping my steps soft out of habit, and my gaze landed on Emma's handbag sitting on the entry table. It was half open, like she'd dropped it and walked away without thinking. I didn't go digging for entertainment. I wasn't curious in that way, but the emptiness of that display case had moved something in me from sadness into attention. I reached in and lifted a folded paper I could see right on top. It was a receipt from a local pawn shop not far from the house. The the kind that prints on thin paper that curls at the edges. It listed multiple items and a total. I didn't read it out loud. I didn't need to. I could feel the facts settle into place with a cold kind of clarity. When Emma came back into the living room, I held the receipt in my hand and asked her calmly, "Where are Dad's watches?" She blinked once. Then her expression shifted into something flat and annoyed, like I'd asked her about a chore she didn't feel like doing. Mom came in behind her, taking in the scene, sensing tension before anyone spoke. The air felt suddenly tighter, like the room had decided to listen. I looked at them both, the receipt still between my fingers, and I waited for one of them to tell the truth first. Emma didn't answer my question right away. She walked past me and set her phone on the coffee table like she needed her hands free for this. Then she looked at the receipt, finally, with the kind of bored patience people use when they think you're being difficult on purpose. "You're really doing this right now?" she said. I kept my voice level. "Where are they?" She exhaled through her nose and gave a small shrug. "They were just sitting there. Dad's gone. They're not doing anyone any good in a box." Mom stepped closer, her eyes moving between my face and the paper in my hand. She didn't look surprised. That was what landed hardest. I held the receipt out, not dramatically, just enough that they could both see it. "This is from a pawn shop. It has a date. It has a list." Emma's mouth tightened, but she didn't look ashamed. She looked irritated, like I'd found a mistake in her paperwork. "So what?" she said. "He always said he'd take care of me. He would have wanted me to have something." I stared at her for a second, then turned to my mom. "Did you know?" Mom's face sharpened like she was choosing a tone. "Lauren, you are not going to interrogate your sister in my living room." "I'm not interrogating her," I said. "I'm asking where property from the estate went." Mom waved her hand as if that word alone was the problem. "Estate, property, you sound like a stranger." Emma leaned back against the fireplace mantel, arms folded, and watched us like she was waiting for Mom to handle it. I set the receipt down on the table carefully, flattening it with 2 fingers. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "Not the house, not any transfer, nothing. And I'm not ignoring this." Mom's voice rose, not into a shout, but into that sharp edge she uses when she wants obedience. "You always have to make things cold. You always have to turn it into a case." I didn't argue. I didn't list the years I spent in that house. I didn't remind her who took Dad to appointments and who slept in a chair next to his bed when his breathing got bad. I just stood there, steady, because I could feel the room tipping into something it wouldn't come back from. Emma's mouth curled into a small smile, almost private, like she was enjoying the angle Mom had taken. Mom stepped forward. The slap happened fast, a flat sound in a quiet room. My head turned slightly with it. My cheek went hot, then numb. For a second, no one moved. Mom's hands were trembling, but her voice stayed firm. "You are not going to ruin this family because you can't let anything go." I lifted my hand to my face once, more as a check than comfort. Then I looked at them both. Emma still had that faint smirk, like the whole moment had confirmed something she already believed. That was when something in me settled. Not anger, not revenge, just a clean, quiet line drawn. "I'm leaving," I said. Mom scoffed like it was a performance. "Fine, go. If you want to abandon us, go." I didn't answer. I walked to the entry table, picked up my keys, and put my coat on without rushing. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say anything else. Outside, the cold hit my lungs immediately. The driveway was glazed with a thin layer of ice, and my boots made a small crunching sound as I walked to my car. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. I drove back to Minneapolis with my jaw tight and my hands calm on the steering wheel. The highway was mostly empty, the kind of late-night quiet where you can hear your tires humming against the road. When I got home, I didn't cry. Not then. I washed my face, took 2 ibuprofen, and sat at my kitchen table again. I opened my laptop and looked at the notes I'd kept during Dad's illness. Expenses, dates, names of agencies, invoice numbers. I'd written them down because I needed to keep track. I realized I still had everything. The next morning I called the pawn shop on the receipt. I didn't accuse anyone. I asked what their process was for estate items and whether they kept records. The woman on the phone told me, politely, that they could confirm transactions with proper identification and a request through the right channels. That was enough. Over the next few weeks, I noticed something else that didn't match my life. A credit monitoring email I hadn't signed up for. A letter from a lender I'd never heard of. A small change in my credit score that didn't have a clear reason. At first, I assumed it was a mix-up. After Dad's death, everything felt messy. Paperwork gets lost. Names get pulled into the wrong file. Then one morning, I logged into my credit report and saw accounts I didn't recognize. 2 payday loans. A credit card I'd never opened. A second card with a balance already climbing. My stomach didn't drop. It tightened, like a knot being pulled. I called my friend Noah, who works in cybersecurity and compliance for a local bank. He's the kind of person who speaks gently even when the information isn't gentle. I told him I needed help verifying whether my identity had been used. He didn't ask for a backstory. He just said, "Send me what you're seeing, and don't call any of those numbers yet." That night, Noah sat across from me at my kitchen table with his laptop open, a plain black notebook beside it. The screen light made his face look tired and focused. He moved through logs and records like he was sorting through something familiar. At first, he was quiet. Then he let out a slow breath. "Lauren," he said, "someone's been applying for credit using your information, more than once." He turned the laptop toward me. The list was longer than I expected. The amounts weren't small, and there, in the access details, was something that made everything feel suddenly precise. A login location tied back to my mother's neighborhood. Noah didn't say her name. He didn't have to. I stared at the screen until the numbers stopped looking like numbers and started looking like time, rent, savings, years of careful work. I reached over and closed the laptop halfway, not out of denial, just to control the moment. Then I opened it again. "Can you pull everything?" I asked. Noah nodded. "Yes, we'll do it clean. Dates, IP logs, application timestamps, the whole trail." I picked up my phone and opened a new note. I typed a short list, one line at a time, like I was building a file, and then I sat there, quiet, with the heater clicking behind me and the snow tapping softly against the window, reading the first account again from the top, as if my calm attention could make it less real. The next morning, I treated it like work, not in a cold way, in a steady way. The kind of steadiness that keeps things from getting worse. I made coffee. I opened my laptop. I pulled up a blank document and wrote 3 lines at the top. Step 1, protect my identity. Step 2, preserve evidence. Step 3, move through the proper channels in order. I didn't add emotion to it. I didn't need to. The situation already had enough weight. Noah came back that evening with a folder of exports and screenshots. He'd labeled everything the way I would have. Date ranges, source names, clear file paths. He didn't exaggerate, he didn't speculate, he just laid out what he could prove. The details were almost worse because they were boring. Application timestamps at odd hours, repeated attempts on the same lenders, approval emails routed to an address that wasn't mine, a phone number attached to the accounts that I didn't recognize, and a set of access logs that pointed back to the same residential internet provider in the same part of town where my mom lived. Noah didn't say, "It's your sister." He said, "This access point is associated with that address range." That kind of language is calm, and it holds up. I spent the next day on the phone with banks and credit bureaus. I froze my credit with all 3. I added fraud alerts. I asked for written confirmation of each action. I created a new email address purely for legal and financial correspondence. I changed every password on every account I had, and I enabled 2-factor authentication wherever it was offered. When one representative asked if I wanted to list an alternate contact, I said, "No, I'm the only authorized person on my accounts." It sounded simple. It felt like reclaiming something. Then I called an attorney. I didn't want a dramatic lawyer. I wanted someone who understood process. I found one through a colleague, and his name was Mr. Harper. When I sat in his office, he didn't ask me how I felt. He asked me what I had in writing. The office smelled like paper and coffee. The chairs were firm. There was a small calendar on his desk with the dates marked neatly in ink. I handed him a folder and a USB drive. He skimmed the top pages without rushing. He paused at the IP log printout, then the account list. He flipped to the page showing the signatures that didn't match mine. "This is identity theft," he said. "And depending on the amounts and methods, it can move fast." I nodded once. He tapped the paper with a pen. "You also mentioned forged mortgage signatures?" I pulled out what I had. A copy of a loan document I'd requested after seeing a lender name I didn't recognize, and a set of notices addressed to my mother's house that weren't in her name. Mr. Harper didn't lean back. He leaned forward. "This isn't a family dispute," he said. "This is a financial crime." That sentence didn't make me feel better. It made me clear. We spent the next hour organizing what would become formal reports. He asked me for precise dates. He asked where I lived during the alleged application periods. He asked if I could prove my location at certain times. He asked if my phone had location history turned on. I could. I don't say that proudly. It's just how I live. My calendar is detailed. My receipts are archived. My building has security cameras. My car logs trips through a GPS app I use for mileage tracking. Facts stack well when you've kept them. While Mr. Harper prepared the first draft of the report, Emma called. Her name flashed on my screen like it belonged to someone else. I answered because I wanted her voice recorded in my memory, not because I wanted contact. She spoke in a softer tone than the funeral, almost careful. "Hey," she said. "How are you doing?" I let a short pause sit there. "I'm fine." She made a small sound, like relief. "Good. Listen, Mom's stressed. The bills are stacking up. You know how things are since Dad." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. It was a familiar script. Pressure, guilt, urgency. My role already assigned. I kept my voice neutral. "Okay." She took that as agreement. "So can you send something? Even just a little? Mom said you're being distant and it's making everything worse." I looked out my window while she spoke. A delivery truck moved slowly through the snow. Someone walked a dog in a bright coat, life continuing at normal speed. "I'll see what I can do," I said. It wasn't a promise. It was a phrase that kept her comfortable. Comfort makes people careless. She started talking again, more confidently now, as if I'd handed her control back. She mentioned the house, repairs, things breaking. She said she'd been handling everything, like she deserved credit for it. I listened, and I didn't correct her. After I hung up, I wrote the call time down, then opened my phone settings and exported the call log, saving it into the same folder. Over the next 2 weeks, Emma escalated in a different way. She started telling people a story about me. At first it was small. I heard from an aunt that Lauren's taking things hard and maybe she's not stable right now. Another cousin texted asking if I was okay, in a tone that didn't feel like care. It felt like checking a rumor. Then I got a message from my mother that didn't even try to be kind. She told me I was tearing the family apart and that people were worried about my behavior. I didn't reply. Silence can be a boundary if you use it on purpose. 3 days after that, I received an email from HR at my company. It was brief and formal. There had been a complaint, allegations of violent conduct and unprofessional behavior. A document had been submitted. They were placing me on unpaid administrative leave while they reviewed. I read it once. Then I forwarded it to Mr. Harper. I didn't call HR to argue. I didn't call my manager to plead. I waited until I had my information in order. That evening, Mr. Harper called me. "Someone filed a police report," he said. "A claim that you broke into your mother's house and assaulted your sister." I felt my chest tighten, but my hands stayed steady. I walked to the closet and pulled out my small box of files. I keep backups in hard copy because that's how my brain works. I had building entry logs from my apartment. I had security footage request forms I'd already used once when someone stole a package. I had location history from my phone. I had a dashcam clip from the street outside my building. I laid it all out on my table in neat lines. Mr. Harper's voice stayed calm. "Do you have an alibi?" "I have proof," I said. The next morning, I went to my building manager's office and asked for video covering the time window mentioned in the report. I didn't tell him the whole story. I said I needed it for a legal matter, and he understood. He was a quiet man who liked rules. That afternoon, I pulled my vehicle GPS history and printed it. I exported phone location data with timestamps. I created a simple timeline: date, time, location, supporting proof. By the time I met Mr. Harper again, I had a folder thick enough that it didn't bend when I picked it up. He reviewed it carefully, then nodded once. "This helps," he said. "A lot." He filed the formal identity theft report with the state, and we submitted the fraud package to the appropriate financial crimes unit. Everything was documented. Everything was dated. At the same time, I quietly booked myself a short-term rental downtown for Christmas week. A secure building. Concierge desk. No one would guess it. I didn't want to be at my usual address if things got noisy. 3 days before Christmas, Mr. Harper called again. "The district attorney reviewed the packet," he said. "They're ready to move." I didn't ask him to repeat it. I just listened. "They'll coordinate with law enforcement," he continued, "and they can execute when the warrant is served. You asked for a specific timing." "Yes," I said. There was a pause, and then he added, "Your evidence is strong. The digital trail, the applications, the signatures. This won't be a misunderstanding." I looked at the small box on my counter where I kept a few of my dad's things that I'd managed to take before everything shifted. A set of old military medals, 2 faded photos, a watch band without the watch. "Okay," I said. That night, I sent one text to my mother. It was short, polite, empty of explanation. I told her I wouldn't be attending Christmas Eve. She didn't reply. I assumed Emma would read it and interpret it exactly the way she wanted, as surrender. I didn't correct that assumption. I put my phone face down on the table, opened my laptop, and checked that my files were backed up in 3 places. Then I waited. Christmas Eve arrived with that particular kind of cold that makes the air feel sharp even indoors. In my rental downtown, everything was quiet and clean, like a hotel that expected you to behave. The windows were tall and the city lights looked softened by falling snow. I spent the day doing small, ordinary things on purpose. I folded laundry. I made a simple dinner. I wiped down the counter twice. I kept the TV off. I wanted the hours to pass without the usual noise in my head. Around early evening, Mr. Harper sent a short message. Things were moving. No details, no commentary, just confirmation. I didn't respond. I set my phone down and sat at the table with my hands around a glass of water, listening to the faint hum of the building. Somewhere above me, someone walked across their floor, and the sound came through as a dull, steady thump. At about 9, I opened my laptop and checked my credit freeze confirmations again, the way you check a locked door even when you know it's locked. Everything was in place. Sometime later, I watched the security camera feed from my mom's front porch. I'd installed that system years earlier when package theft in the neighborhood became common. Dad liked it because it made him feel less vulnerable. Mom liked it because it was convenient. I had access because I set it up and managed the account. The view was familiar. The porch light made the snow look brighter than it was. The wreath on the door was slightly crooked. The driveway was half covered, tire tracks already pressed into it. Inside the camera's audio range, I could hear muffled music from the house, people moving, a burst of laughter, plates clinking. It looked warm in there, busy and crowded, the kind of scene that makes you forget, for a moment, what's under it. Emma appeared in the frame a few times, gliding in and out of view as she opened the door for guests. She was dressed like she wanted to be remembered, holding herself like she owned the room. People leaned in toward her when they spoke. She touched arms lightly when she laughed. I watched without expression. This wasn't my life anymore. It was evidence. I didn't keep the feed up constantly. I checked it the way you check a timestamp on a file. Once, then again, later. Enough to know what was happening and when. A little after 11, I refreshed the view. 2 vehicles pulled up that didn't match anyone in our family. One was a marked police car. The other looked unremarkable, but it moved with the same kind of intent. Doors opened. Several people stepped out, walking with purpose up the drive. The porch camera caught the approach. The flashing lights weren't dramatic through that lens. They were steady and bright, washing the snow in brief red and blue pulses. The front door opened. For a second, I could only see bodies shifting in the doorway. Then the camera angle cleared, and I caught the first uniformed officer stepping inside, followed by two men in plain clothes who carried themselves differently. They didn't look around like guests. They scanned the room like they were measuring it. The music stopped. Even through the porch mic, I could sense the drop in sound, the way a house goes still when everyone realizes the same thing at once. Someone's voice rose, sharp and confused. Then another voice, firmer, directing. Emma moved toward the doorway fast, her posture changing, her arms lifting in a defensive gesture. She was talking, but the audio didn't pick up every word. I saw her hand motion toward the living room, then toward the hallway, as if she could redirect the entire situation by insisting on a different narrative. Then one of the plainclothes investigators stepped forward and held something out. A paper, a folder. I couldn't see the details, but I recognized the rhythm of it. Formal identification. Official purpose. Emma's face changed. Color drained from it in a way that was visible even under warm indoor lighting. She glanced over her shoulder toward where my mother would be, and her mouth opened as if she couldn't decide which lie to start with. The officer moved closer. Then Emma's hands went behind her back. Not gently, not roughly, just with the efficient movement of someone following procedure. The handcuffs went on. Even without sound, I could feel the moment land in the room. Guests stepping back, a frozen circle forming, someone's hand covering their mouth, a person in the background raising a phone like they couldn't help themselves. They walked Emma out the front door. Her feet hesitated on the porch steps. She pulled back once, not enough to break free, just enough to show resistance. Then she stopped, because resistance doesn't change the outcome when the paperwork is correct. At the bottom of the steps, the lights from the patrol cars flashed across her face, and it looked different from the way she'd looked earlier when she was greeting relatives. The confidence was gone. What was left was raw panic, and the desperate calculation of someone trying to find a person to blame. I watched them guide her into the car. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I closed the laptop slowly. Then I sat back in my chair and waited, because I knew what would come next. That's how these things go. They reach for the closest target, the person who refuses to carry the mess anymore. At 11:55 p.m., my phone vibrated on the table. Emma's name. I let it buzz twice. Then I answered. The background noise was chaotic, voices overlapping, a door slamming, the muffled echo of a hallway, and the faint, distant sound of those same sirens, now closer and sharper. Emma didn't say hello. "What did you do?" she demanded. "Why are there 2 police cars here?" Her voice was jagged, like she'd been crying and yelling at the same time. Under it, I could hear the edge of fear. I kept my tone steady. "Where are you calling from?" "Are you kidding?" she snapped. "They arrested me. They're saying I committed fraud. They're saying all this insane stuff. Mom is losing it. This is your fault." I didn't rush to correct her. I didn't argue point by point. I let her keep talking long enough that she ran out of breath. Then I said calmly, "I didn't make you apply for loans in my name." There was a pause, like the words had hit something in her that couldn't be smoothed over. "You're trying to destroy us," she said, quieter now, but sharper. "You're doing this because you hate me." I looked at the dark window in front of me, at the faint reflection of my own face in the glass. I could see the steady line of my shoulders, the calm set of my mouth. "No," I said. "This is about records and signatures. It's about what can be proven." Emma made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Mom said you weren't coming. She said you were finally backing off." I didn't respond to that. I let another small silence sit between us, the kind that forces a person to hear themselves. Then I said, "You chose this when you used my information. Everything after that is procedure." She started yelling again, words tumbling over each other, blaming, pleading, threatening in the same breath. I didn't interrupt. I didn't raise my voice. I waited until her voice cracked and she stopped for air. Then I said one sentence, evenly. "Do not contact me again." And I ended the call. I blocked her number. I blocked my mother's number too, because I knew the next wave would come through her. After that, I sat in the quiet for a long time. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel sadness. I felt the strange stillness that comes when something inevitable has finally happened. I got up, rinsed my glass, and wiped the counter once more. Then I went back to the table and opened my laptop again, because there was still one more thing I needed to do before I let the night end. By morning, the city looked muted under fresh snow, like someone had turned the volume down on everything. I made tea, stood by the window for a minute, and watched a plow move slowly down the street, pushing a clean line through the white. Then my phone lit up. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A minute later, a second call, then a third. A voicemail notification followed, and then another. I knew exactly who it was without listening. When people lose control, they borrow phones. I forwarded the missed call logs to Mr. Harper and left it there. Around mid-morning, he called me directly. "They've executed the warrants," he said. "She's in custody." I didn't ask questions that didn't matter. I asked the ones that did. "Are the charges filed?" "Yes," he said. "Identity theft, fraud, and they're also looking at the mortgage documents and the transfers tied to the house." I looked down at my hands on the table, steady and still. "And my employer?" I asked. "Send me whatever HR gave you," he said. "We'll address it in order." I forwarded the email chain and my timeline file. Dates, timestamps, the building footage request confirmation, the location history exports. By noon, my manager texted me a short message asking if I could talk. I told him yes, and we scheduled a call with HR present. I didn't offer explanations in text. I didn't argue in writing. I just kept everything clean. During the call, HR sounded formal, like they were reading from a script, but my manager's voice had a different tone. It had the careful shape of someone realizing they'd been handed something false. I told them I had evidence that the police report filed against me was fabricated. I told them my attorney had already submitted documentation to the authorities. I offered to provide the proof. No emotion, no speeches, just statements. HR asked if I could email the records. "I can," I said, "and I will include my attorney on the thread." There was a pause. Then HR's tone softened slightly. "Okay." Within an hour, I sent a single email with a clean attachment list, timeline, building entry logs, footage confirmation, GPS history, and the state report reference numbers. I wrote 2 sentences in the body. I didn't add adjectives. It felt strange, being calm while my life was being pulled at from both ends. But calm is useful. Calm gets things processed. That afternoon, Mr. Harper called again. "The bank is moving," he said. "The house is now part of an active fraud investigation. They're freezing activity tied to the mortgage and related accounts." I stayed quiet for a moment, letting that settle. "So, what happens to Mom?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "If she's tied to the fraudulent documents or benefited knowingly, they'll look at that. But even without that, the property is now unstable. She may receive notices quickly." It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was a kind of dull confirmation. Actions have consequences. Sometimes the consequences are delayed, but they arrive all the same. In the late afternoon, I finally listened to one voicemail. It was my mother. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, shaky and urgent, and she kept saying my name like it was a lever she could pull. "Lauren, please," she said. "This has gone too far. You need to tell them it was a mistake. She's your sister. She can't be in jail. You don't understand what you're doing." I listened without moving. She cried, then tried to sound firm again. She told me I was being cruel. She told me I was punishing the family. She told me I was heartless. When she stopped to breathe, I saved the voicemail and exported it into the same folder. Then I did something I hadn't planned to do that day, but I knew I needed to do before the story became whatever my mother wanted it to be. I opened our extended family group chat. I didn't type a long message. I didn't explain the past 2 years. I didn't describe the slap, the kitchen papers, the empty display case. None of that was the point. The point was proof. I wrote 3 lines. I said there was a false police report filed against me. I said the truth had been confirmed through official investigation. I said I was sharing documentation so no one would be misled. Then I attached a compressed folder, the credit report anomalies, the fraud account list, Noah's exported logs, and the attorney's filing confirmations. I included the report reference numbers. I included dates. Within minutes, the chat went quiet. No new messages, no reactions, just silence. That silence told me more than any apology would have. People don't rush to speak when they realize they've been wrong, and they don't know how to step back with dignity. About an hour later, one of my aunts messaged privately, just 2 words. "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I wasn't interested in rebuilding a bridge that had collapsed the first time pressure was applied. Some relationships are only stable when nothing is tested. I'd seen enough. The next call I got was from Mr. Harper, again with a practical update. "Your mother has been served," he said. "They delivered notices. She's being advised to vacate due to foreclosure proceedings linked to the fraudulent debt and mortgage activity." I closed my eyes briefly, not in grief exactly, in acknowledgement. The childhood house wasn't just a building to me. It was where Dad sat in his chair with a blanket over his knees, watching old movies and falling asleep halfway through. It was where I mixed medications at the kitchen counter. It was where I learned, in the last month, that my mother would rather protect a lie than protect me. I didn't drive over there. I didn't go watch it happen. I didn't need to. A few days later, my manager called again. He told me HR had completed their review. My unpaid leave would be reversed. My pay would be restored. The complaint would be closed as unsubstantiated. He didn't say the word sorry, but his tone carried it. He asked if I was okay. "I'm handling it," I said. That was true. By early January, the legal process had started to solidify into scheduled dates and official language. Mr. Harper updated me as needed, and I let him do his job. I gave statements when asked. I signed what I needed to sign. I didn't attend anything that wasn't necessary. And then, slowly, the calls stopped. Not because they found peace, because the old ways of pulling me back in didn't work anymore. One morning, Noah sent me a short message. "Your credit is stabilizing," he wrote. "The freezes are holding. The disputes are moving." I replied with a single, "Thank you." That was enough. Near the end of the month, Mr. Harper forwarded a formal notice about Emma's case status. The language was plain and heavy. The timeline was clear. The charges weren't disappearing. The evidence was too clean. I printed it and placed it in the folder with everything else. Then I sat at my table and looked at the small velvet-lined box I'd been keeping close since Dad's funeral. Inside were the few things I'd managed to save: the medals, the photos, the watch band, a letter he'd written years ago and never mailed. I ran my thumb along the edge of one photograph, the paper slightly soft from age. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt like I'd stopped losing. That night, I packed 2 suitcases, not in a rushed way, in an orderly way, clothing folded, documents in a slim binder, laptop and hard drive padded carefully, the box of Dad's items wrapped in a sweater and placed in my carry-on. I had already accepted a new role in another city, a quiet opportunity that didn't come with people who knew my family name. I didn't announce it. I didn't post it. I didn't invite commentary. Before I went to bed, I opened my phone settings and started the process of changing my number. Then I logged out of old social accounts and deleted the ones I didn't need. I made a list of the few people I still trusted and sent them my new contact information with a short note. New number. Same me. Please don't share. Then I put the phone down. I turned off the lights, and for the first time in months, the silence in the room felt like it belonged to me. The first morning in my new city, I woke up before my alarm. Not because I was anxious, because the apartment was unfamiliar in a quiet way. The heater clicked on and off with a different rhythm than the one back home. The street outside sounded different too. Fewer cars, more space between noises. I got out of bed, put on a sweatshirt, and made tea. I didn't check my phone right away. I stood at the counter while the kettle warmed and watched the window start to lighten at the edges. When the tea was ready, I carried it to the small table by the window and sat down. I didn't have a view of anything dramatic, just an ordinary street, a few bare trees, and a corner shop opening up for the day. It was enough. After breakfast, I did one practical thing, then another, the way I always do when I'm rebuilding a routine. I set up my new mail forwarding. I updated my banking address. I confirmed my credit freezes were still active. I stored my legal folder in a locked drawer and kept only the current case reference number on a single sticky note. Then I cleaned lightly. Not scrubbing, just wiping surfaces and putting things where they belonged. It was a way of telling my nervous system that this space was mine. Every few weeks, Mr. Harper sent brief updates. He never tried to dramatize them. He wrote like a person who respects time and facts. Emma's case moved forward with the same quiet inevitability as a calendar. Hearings, filings, evidence review, the identity theft charges held. The false report was documented as false. My name, at least in the official places, was clean again. My mother tried to reach me twice through relatives. The first time, a cousin sent me a message saying, "Mom just wants to talk and she's really suffering." I didn't reply. I didn't block the cousin either. I just let the message sit there untouched until it slid down my notification list and disappeared into the past. The second time, a different aunt emailed me a long paragraph that started with prayer and ended with the word forgiveness. I read it once, then archived it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to teach anyone a lesson. I was done participating. What surprised me most was how quickly life filled in the empty spaces once I stopped feeding the old situation. My job felt quieter, not easier exactly, but cleaner. People asked me for work, not for emotional labor. Meetings ended on time. My manager thanked me for clear analysis and didn't treat my calm as something to exploit. At night, I started walking after dinner. Same route, same pace. I watched the seasons shift in small ways. A new sign in a shop window. A neighbor's dog that always barked at squirrels. The smell of someone's laundry venting warm air into cold evenings. It wasn't exciting, it was stable. One Saturday, I unpacked the last box I'd been avoiding, the one with my dad's things. I put the medals in a small frame. I placed the photographs in a simple album. I set the watch band and the letter into a drawer lined with soft cloth, not because I was hiding them, but because I didn't want them handled casually. I sat on the floor for a minute with the album open, and I let myself miss him in a quiet way. No anger, no speeches. Just the reality of loss, and the reality of what I protected. Later that day, Noah called. He didn't ask for details. He asked if I was settling in. He told me my credit score was recovering steadily and the disputes had been resolved in my favor. "Your life is back in your name," he said. I thanked him. Then we talked about normal things. Weather, work, a show he'd been watching. After we hung up, I realized something small, but important. For a long time, I thought being loyal meant absorbing whatever my family handed me. I thought maturity meant staying quiet so other people could stay comfortable. I thought if I just kept proving myself, eventually I'd be treated fairly. But fairness isn't something you earn from people who benefit from unfairness. You can be kind and still be clear. You can be calm and still be final. You can love someone's memory and still refuse the systems that use it as leverage. That's the part I keep with me now. And I've noticed something since this happened. People can sense when you're the one who's always been the steady one. They find you. They test the edges. A few months ago, a new coworker asked if we could grab coffee. We sat outside with paper cups, and she told me, very carefully, that her brother had been helping with her finances while she was going through a divorce. She said she didn't want to sound paranoid, but things weren't adding up. I didn't tell her what to do emotionally. I told her what to do practically. I told her how to pull her credit report, how to freeze her accounts, how to document everything without escalating the conflict at home. She listened like someone who'd been waiting for permission to be factual. That conversation stayed with me because it reminded me how common this is, not the exact details, but the pattern. Someone takes, someone enables, Someone stays quiet because it feels safer, until it isn't. Now, my evenings are mostly simple. I wash dishes, I plan groceries, I take a walk. I put my phone on the charger in another room so I'm not tempted to scroll myself into restlessness. I read a few pages of a book and fall asleep without the old tightness in my chest. The quiet isn't empty anymore. It's protective. If you've made it this far, thank you for sitting with my story. If it resonated with you, I hope it reminded you that you're allowed to choose order over chaos and truth over performance, even when it's uncomfortable. And if you'd like to support the channel, please take a second to like and subscribe. It helps more than you'd think, and it keeps this little community growing in a steady, calm way. Also, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read those, and I genuinely like seeing where everyone's listening from. 2 popular stories will be up next, and I'll see you there.